Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being.
Welcome to the 232nd episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And here we are finally in February, past what feels like the longest month of the year. And it is Race Equality Week in the UK, which runs from the 5th to the 11th of February. Race Equality Week is an annual UK-wide movement uniting hundreds of thousands of organisations and individuals to address the barriers to race equality in the workplace. The aim is to keep the momentum going and accelerate change by uniting thousands of organisations into action to seriously address race inequality in the workplace. This year's theme, #ListenActChange, reflects ongoing findings and feedback. In particular, the fact that only 25% of the race equality membership community believes their organisation focuses on action, change, and impact, and not just words. 63% believe that less than a quarter of allies are actually helping to tackle race inequality. 44% said their senior leaders and managers are committed to tackling race inequality, but only 21% said their senior leaders and managers are making an impact in tackling race equality. Now, it's free to get involved, and if you want to, please go to the website, and the link is also in the show notes. It's www.raceequalitymattersaltogether.com/Race Equality Week, and you'll find all the information you need to get involved there. Maybe you're a bit late this year, don't worry, there are webinars, there are activities. It's a really great website, so do check it out. So, given that we are in Race Equality Week, I'm really excited to be speaking to Nzinga Orgill, founder and CEO of Avi-I Solutions, to talk about equity in the aviation industry. She will also talk about her lived experience of race and racism. Nzinga has redefined the aviation landscape with her pioneering leadership. With nearly 2 decades of experience, Nzinga has transitioned from frontline roles at Heathrow Airport to reshaping the industry's future through Avi-I Solutions. Her impactful work not only champions accessibility, equity, and inclusion, but also delivers substantial financial and reputation benefits for the organizations fortunate enough to collaborate with her. And I have to say, I'm very lucky to know Nzinga because we met at the Hatch Accelerator that we did together last year. And Nzinga's commitment to inclusivity and innovation positions Avi-I Solutions as a trailblazer, not just navigating the skies, but creating a future where every passenger's journey is an inclusive, enriching experience. Through her dynamic leadership, Nzinga sparks critical conversations, cultivates financial success, and elevates organizational reputations. So really looking forward to this discussion. Nzinga, a huge welcome to the show.
Hi, Layla. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's very exciting to have you because, of course, we met when we were doing the Hatch Accelerator program.
I know, which feels like a lifetime ago. So much has happened since then, but yeah, a really enjoyable experience and some amazing connections. Hence why we're here today.
Exactly. And I've just read out your bio, but I think it's great for listeners to know from you what you're working on at the moment.
So yes, I have an aviation background, so nearly 20 years at one of the busiest airports in Europe. And since leaving the airport, probably around 2021, if memory serves me, I embarked on a journey of entrepreneurship. So I set up an anti-racism consultancy, which worked really, really well. I got some amazing clients and some brilliant opportunities to really transform the work culture of many organizations. What I've been able to do is take some time after setting up my first business, which was around anti-racism, Race Expert Limited, and really think about, where my priorities are in terms of where I can deliver transformation and also where my expertise and experience lie. And as mentioned, I have got a lot of, background in the aviation space. So I've been able to pivot and navigate towards working with organizations in the aviation sector, deliver more accessible, equitable, and inclusive practices across their airports using passenger insights, innovation, and artificial intelligence. And the real aspiration behind this is 2 things, to be fair, Layla. The first is when we talk about having passenger experiences and making sure they're exceptional, it's important that we make them exceptional for every single passenger. So if you fit into the category that's deemed as the norm, you will relatively, experience few encounters that cause your journey to be too, uncomfortable or too complicated. But if you fit into a marginalized group, the likelihood of you encountering challenges on your journey seems to increase. When we think about, we've got passengers who travel through airports every day that require, support because they're physically disabled. They might, be neurodivergent. They might, be part of the LGBTQ plus community and therefore, be transgender. There might be pregnant mothers or people that have just recently given birth, people that are very old, people that are quite young. The list is endless. And for me, I don't feel that there's enough being done to cater to all those needs, to provide that exceptional service for those individuals. And if you think about how airports make their revenue, they make their revenue by selling their airplane or aircraft tickets. They sell tickets to people who want to travel through their airport to make it onto their end destinations. But they also make their money through the commercial offerings they have once these passengers get into the departure lounge. And I can't think of anything worse than going shopping or sitting for food after I've received degrading, dehumanizing behavior, either through check-in or security because of a lack of cultural competence. I can't think of expecting anything, more ridiculous from passengers. And it's just important, if we want to make that money, if we want to be known as inclusive in the aviation space, the work needs to happen for all passengers.
Very beautifully and succinctly put. And so, you sharing your story, I can hear that those are the true values of what made you set up Avi-I Solutions Limited. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah. As well as being lucky and very fortunate to be within the aviation sector for so long. And prior to that, I worked with National Express. I've got a very strong transport background. And the whole idea of just taking somebody on a journey is something that I'm in love with, whether it's physically, whether it's spiritually. I like the fact that we are constantly evolving, changing and switching things up. So, transport and aviation and coaches are things that I'm very passionate about. I'm yet to kind of tap into the train space yet. But what I would say is it's definitely part of the reason, but also because I myself am a passenger. I've traveled so many times throughout my life, and there have been some journeys that have been memorable for great reasons and others that have been memorable for the opposite. And, as a Black woman, something that I'm very proud of and I own in every part of my beingness, there's been parts of the world where I've traveled to, and someone who knows the aviation sector very well, someone who knows how to operate and function as a passenger, being prepared to travel through airports, I felt uncomfortable. I've felt like at times I have been racially profiled because of the fact that I present as a Black woman. I felt that because of potentially how even things like my hair is done might be a reason why I'm getting that extra random search that doesn't feel so random anymore. And it's just also sometimes a level of, customer service you get. Like when you are watching how other people are being interacted with and spoken to, and then you're getting a different version of customer service, which doesn't feel very customer orientated or even much like service, it begs a question that there is just so much that needs to be done in this space. And that was part of the reason why. And like I said, I've been able to travel quite far and quite broadly across, I say, all continents, and I've really enjoyed having that opportunity to do that. But when people have paid a lot of money for their plane tickets, they want to have a great time. And part of the holiday is the journey that takes you to that destination. And if you've got people who have no regard for that, it just almost taints your holiday or your business trip or whatever you're traveling for before you've even started the journey.
I couldn't agree more. And obviously my experiences are different to yours, especially in terms of hair. But my goodness, 20 years ago when I was much younger, I would always get pulled to the side before I had to get on a plane, always my passport triple checked. I remember sort of family trips where our baggage would get doubly searched. So even though it's different, I completely connect with what you're saying, and have seen it, and have seen my Black friends and colleagues go through the things that you're describing as well. So I'd like to think about this term equity and what it means to you and the work that you're doing in your business.
So, I love the term equity. I know prior to equity, equality was something that was really spoken about a lot. And, the idea of everyone having, equal treatment sounds wonderful in a utopia where we're all born the same. but the reality is that we're not. We are born differently, and we should be able to embrace those differences. That's what being included means. It means that we are seen for who we are, and we're able to show up in that beingness. Now, when we think about equity, it's about saying, what accommodations do we need to make to give people access to what everyone has access to? So, for example, if you think about it in terms of the work that we do at Avi-I Solutions, what needs to be done and put in place to make sure that every passenger has access to the same things. They have access to a wonderful travel experience. They have access to a great security experience. They have access to commercial offerings, whether it's food, whether it's, shopping, clothes, perfumes, whatever, whether they have access to experiential activities within the airport. So, you'll go through an airport and sometimes you've got a really creative pop-up stand. It used to be a bit of my world. And, you want to be able to interact with it and interface with it and to be able to get the experiential value from it. But can every passenger say that they're able to do that and receive that? Probably not. Thinking about the sensory overload challenges of people who are neurodivergent and what that means for that journey, but also the fact that it's very difficult sometimes to explain and to qualify to people who don't fully understand. And that tells me there is not enough equity. And, I can give you so many examples, Layla. When you see groups of passengers, come into the airport, there are certain passengers that have profiles and they travel in particular ways. For example, when I used to work at the airport, lots of people who came from the South Asian community, they'd turn up at the airport with probably a lot of extended family, because to them, family is extremely important. Being able to say goodbye to people and wave them off and bid them farewell was really fundamental to them. But then the whole experience they were receiving, because they weren't necessarily direct passengers, it was almost like, well, you're in the way or you're taking up too much space. And I think it's important that actually, no, people deserve to be sent off however they want to be sent off, not treated the same way. Just because a particular group of people might turn up at the airport by themselves doesn't mean that's one, size fits for all. We all show up differently. And it's about saying, okay, so this one passenger's turned up by themselves with one bag, waving them off on their journey, have a great time. Or this passenger's turned up with 15 of their closest family and friends to wave them off with 3 bags. Again, they're treated, in a respectful and dignified way because they deserve to be. And that's the whole point around equity. It's about creating that balance where people get the necessary accommodations to allow them to have that experience. And it also boils down to accessibility. Can you access what you need to make your journey exceptional? Can you access people? Can you access things like, special assistance or support if required? Can you access information? I've traveled abroad, like I said, and luckily for me, because I understand how a flight information display screen works, more often than not, I can find where my departure gate is and how I'm meant to get there. But if you don't know these things, you don't know where you're getting to, you don't know how you're going to get to that departure gate, you don't know who to speak to. And again, access to information is not there. So therefore, you're not being treated equitably. So it kind of bleeds into so many different areas, Layla, but there's a couple of examples that hopefully help to kind of build on the point about what it means.
Very, very helpful examples. And I'm kind of chuckling because if anyone has watched Asian sitcoms, or goodness gracious me, there's always jokes about South Asian families going to the airports. So there's a joke side from an intra-community perspective, but absolutely what you say is, who is the ideal traveler, quote unquote, and who has created this idea of the ideal traveler? So, the business traveler with a one carry-on bag that fits in the overhead locker, that doesn't need extra, quote unquote, support, versus, yes, you're right, people should have the choice to be the kind of passenger they need to be. And I also really hear you about the perspective of navigation and the expectations. And if you've never flown before or you haven't navigated through an airport, how do you just know? And I have noticed that in airports, there isn't the information that there was 20 years ago in terms of information desks and accessibility. And I think that's very detrimental. So equity is really, really, I think, at the forefront more than it ever has been, or it should be, because of all these digitizations and changes. So I just wanted to thank you for that, as I think it's really, really helpful. And then I wanted to think a bit about mental ill health and culture, and of course, recovery, and then people maybe experiencing mental ill health, being triggered, being in an airport, or something happens, or managing their mental well-being. So it's what do you think the biggest challenges are in accessing support for passengers traveling through the airport, and particularly from, as you've very helpfully highlighted, varying cultural perspectives?
I think, traveling for me, and like I said, I've got the background in aviation. I love traveling, but one of the things that I most look forward to is just, I guess, getting through the whole security process so I can relax and shop and eat and mooch around and, people watch and do all the things that I love doing as a traveler. But I know that for many people, traveling can be quite stressful. There's very anxious because it's something that you don't necessarily do every day or even that regularly, unless you're someone who maybe travels for work. And you spent a lot of money, you've had to do a lot of planning and coordinating to get everything to align to make sure that the journey is as easy as possible. You're coming in there, and we have to understand passengers are presenting themselves however they show up. So you could be someone who's overly excited that wants to travel and can't wait to get, onto the departure gates and onto the aircraft to get to your destination. You could be someone who is quite a nervous traveler who needs a lot of reassurance, a lot of patience, and wants to make sure everything's double checked. You could be a mother with multiple children, or someone who's caring for people who have special needs or requirements. So therefore, everyone's journey is different, and you've got lots of different factors that might contribute to how people show up in terms of stress and anxiety. You've got people who are petrified of flying. They are absolutely petrified. And, someone who enjoys traveling, I don't actually love flying. It takes a lot for me to get myself mentally prepared and comfortable to be sitting on an aircraft, taking off, landing. Oh, don't mention turbulence, like literally panicking. But I think it's about really understanding how we can create that calm for every single passenger that requires and needs it, and provide the support that they're asking for. If you come through the airport and you find it quite overwhelming, and again, I touched upon this a little bit in terms of different passengers from marginalized groups that might have different needs. You could be someone who's neurodivergent, therefore going to an airport might create sensory overload that create anxiety and stress for you. What we don't go and do is go in and save the day and tell people to calm down and tell them what we think they want to hear. We understand what they need from us. Do they need a space where they can find time to, decompress? Do they want a, opportunity to access a room, whether it's a sensory room? Are there, equipment we can provide to try and change that journey? Or is it just a case of leaving them alone? What do they want? And I think that's really important in understanding how to deal with the challenges around mental health. On the flip side, there is a responsibility as human beings to look after each other, I believe. So if you're seeing someone who's acting erratically or isn't presenting themselves in a way that tells you that everything is okay, there's nothing stopping us from asking the question. We cannot force people, unless they pose a risk in terms of danger to themselves or to others, to take action. But we can have those conversations, and we can be more consciously aware of what's going on around us. So if we're seeing people who are, appearing to be overly nervous or overly anxious, or, behaving in a way that doesn't necessarily, align to someone who's comfortable or, prepared for travel, we can have those conversations and offer up the opportunity for support if they choose to reach out. So I think there's a massive part to play in this space, because flying can be one of the most nervous things, nerve-wracking things that we do, but it doesn't have to be. And it's about, building that trust, because when you think about it, people aren't just trusting you with their bags once they check them in, or trusting you to make sure that they're not, they're ensuring that there aren't any risks that are coming through security because they're searching everyone properly. They're trusting you to take them from one place safely to another place. And that safety isn't just a physical safety, Layla, it's a psychological safety. And we need to be able to open up our airports and our skies to enable and allow for that.
Yes, that's always the case, isn't it? When we think about health and safety, it is the whole package. It's the physical safety, absolutely, but that psychological safety and how that's still catching up with the physical health and safety. Really helpful examples, again, thinking about sensory overload for anyone on the neurodivergent spectrum, and how their being neurodivergent will impact different people in different ways. But yes, airports aren't the most, I think, the most neurodivergent friendly spaces often, because of the lighting and the sound, etc. So yeah, hugely hugely helpful. And I think those things, if they're going to be useful in airports, they're going to be useful in all workplaces. And then building on that, then, from your amazing experience that you've had in the industry and working in airports, what do you think airports can do to shift the status quo and integrate culture, legal resilience, and inclusion?
So I think it starts off with some fact finding. Ideally, it'd be great to say that we haven't got a problem across the aviation sector. Everything's great and good, but all we need to do is to type into Google. You'll see a flurry of articles come up around behavior or treatment of passengers at airports. And then, that's just Google and searching there. But if you go onto, social media, TikTok is rife with, posts that have had over millions, tens of millions of views and likes and comments on it about passengers being subjected to degrading and dehumanizing treatment. So I think there's a massive piece of work that we can absolutely think about, and that we need to explore when we're talking about how we can create that inclusive culture and what airports need to do. But for me, it starts off with doing some fact finding. Where are you as an airport? Have you really had a look at your end-to-end process to understand, is it as inclusive as it can be? Are there potential blind spots that you haven't seen that you don't appreciate because guess what? It's not been flagged or brought to your attention. And then it's a piece around asking passengers for feedback. I've never known any solution that's worked if you're not engaging with the people you're creating the solution for. You need to get that input, you need to get that information, you need to get that, experience shared, so you're able then to leverage that information and use that to help guide you in terms of what you do next. I think what's really important is we're moving towards a more technological era in terms of people enjoying and not just, using self-service options, whether it's check-in and whether it's bag drop, whether it's immigration, e-gates. I think it's about embracing that technology and using that as part of some of the solutions that we create, that it allows different passengers to show up however they choose to, in whatever way aligns to them, to make them as comfortable as possible. So I think there's definitely factors around that to absolutely think about and to absolutely, understand further. And just to pick up on in terms of, challenging the status quo. So as I've mentioned, it's about obviously the data, so where we are, but also passenger insights. And then it's about understanding, and being open to what else is going on out there across the aviation sector. What might be happening in parts of Asia won't necessarily be the same things that are happening in America and Europe. It's about sharing and exchanging information, or having a platform or a place where you can get best practice and understand what other airports are doing. And even further to that, understanding what other industries are doing. Sometimes we always think the solutions that we need to have are in the sector that we're part of. And that's where the work that I've done previous to Avi-I Solutions really comes in. I was really fortunate, like I said, to set up and work in the EGI space with my anti-racism business. And working across different sectors really allowed me to kind of almost borrow and repurpose best practice and share it with organizations that probably hadn't even considered it because they're not close enough to that industry or sector. So I think it's really important to understand how, you can use what's already out there in the same sector or a different sector to really challenge and change the status quo. Also, status quo isn't just about changing how you do things. It's about changing how you align to it and how people think about it. We talked about psychological safety for passengers to come in and feel comfortable to show up as who they are. There needs to be a space as well for, staff members to learn and grow, and a psychological safety in terms of understanding what is required to become more culturally competent to deliver that exceptional service for passengers. That's extremely important. In terms of integrating culture, it's about really, again, celebrating how people turn up to the airport, understanding, that some people might travel in a particular way. Why is that? It could be culturally based, and culture isn't just, let me be clear, what background you come from or what ethnicity or race you belong to. Culture could be, the types of groups you associate with. So you might be someone who, enjoys girly holidays. That's part of your culture to have, a group of young women who are traveling together. You might be someone who enjoys, traveling for sports events. That's part of your culture because that's part of the people you choose to be, include in your community. So when we talk about culture, let's not just, divorce everything else and just solely focus on the aspects of culture that we can see and that are visible. And then legal resilience. the less opportunity there is for people to feel excluded and discriminated against, the less likelihood there is going to be for, legal action. You want to be legally resilient, then you need to make sure you've got the right processes and policies in place to protect yourselves, but most importantly, protect the passengers that you're serving. People don't necessarily want to take legal action, but if they feel an injustice, they're absolutely going to and are entitled to. What needs to stop is that feeling of injustice. And the only way that's going to change is if we look at the data, the passenger insights, what's happening across industries, and we really think about the culture and the psychological safety we provide for people to learn to be able to not just do things differently, but align and think about how things are done differently.
Yes. And when you were talking about legal resilience, I was thinking about the case that happened in COVID with BA and the passenger that sued around compensation, so not being in vouchers, frustration, that's the legal term, frustration, and having compensation in cash. So that's one example, and I know there are many. If we think about disabled passengers, particularly wheelchair users, I'm thinking about buses specifically, not so much airplanes, but there's that whole piece, isn't there, that you've picked up on in our thread of conversation today. And I think it's also about being proactive and not reactive. So why do we always wait, and this goes across so many workplaces and sectors and industries, for something to go wrong, rather than thinking about how can we make this an inclusive journey from the minute someone walks in our building, steps on our plane, gets on our bus, gets on our train, as opposed to, oh gosh, well, if we get sued because the toilet's out of use and a wheelchair user can't use it, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I think that's really disappointing, and thank you for giving those very helpful examples of what can be done and looking at it in a very integrated way.
Layla, just on the point of being proactive, I 150% agree with you. What I will say, though, the reality of life is that there are going to be some things that, we don't know about until we know. So there's going to be that requirement to be reactive rather than proactive. But then it's the level of swiftness in terms of the response. So ideally, it'd be an amazing, world where we could preempt every single thing, especially when it comes to the passenger experience and having them feeling included and like they're getting the equitable treatment that they deserve. But the reality is sometimes we might not have even thought about something until it presents itself. And it's just how that's responded to, is that used as an opportunity to create positive change and to transform an aspect of the business? Or is it something that's vehemently denied or trying to be brushed aside or almost avoided, and therefore, made to make the person who's flagged it wrong? So I think we've got an opportunity to do great work in whichever way these things arise, whether we're doing them proactively or reactively. But I think it's just definitely important that we have an open approach to desiring to want to have that change in terms of creating more of an inclusive travel experience across airports.
Yes, and I do agree with you. We can't know everything about everything, but I suppose I'm coming from the perspective of in work, but in maybe a more traditional office-based workplace where, there's a sense of, oh, we'll wait for a wheelchair user, but our offices are fine. And you think, no, because if we make it more inclusive for one person, you're actually making it more inclusive for everyone. So yes, while I totally agree with you, and I think the passenger example is a very, very helpful one, I often think that workplaces can really rest on their laurels too. But thank you for mentioning that. And of course, you are an incredibly busy person as a professional. You have a personal life. I'd love you to share with our listeners how you look after your own mental health. What are your top 3 tips?
Wow, I love this question because for me, mental health and well-being is so important. It's important for everybody, and we've all got our own different ways of managing it and looking after it. And I think for me, based on the line of work that I do as well, more often than not, it's not just something like I can kind of park when I get home. I live some of these challenges that are encountered across airports on a day-to-day basis. So it is so important that I am topping myself up and looking after myself so I can be the best version of myself to be of service to the organizations that I work with. So in terms of my own mental health and well-being, I'm really structured, Layla. So I have a bit of a morning routine, a bit of an evening routine. I schedule as much as I can. So, things like meditation, journaling, exercise, a bit of audiobooks. I love listening to different books. At the moment, I'm just finished reading the The Awakening, I believe it's called, if I get the title right. That's one thing when you've got audiobooks, you don't always pay attention to the title, which is something that I need to definitely do more of. The Radical Awakening by Dr. Shafali, a brilliant book that I've, not long finished and I really enjoyed. And, just having these structured days help me to be, fully intentional, present and on purpose, and allows me then to be, able to show up for organizations the way that I need to. I also try and interject, magical moments in my day. And when I say moments, it's normally a bit longer than moments. But, for example, speaking to family members, people that I care about, friends, it's lovely speaking to clients and customers, but sometimes it's nice to have someone who knows you a little bit more, who can really uplift you with just something that helps you to remind yourself that you're human and you're allowed to experience a range of feelings throughout the day. So I absolutely love that. And then in terms of, mental health and well-being, I learned to, I guess, process things that haven't gone well. So, for me, what's really important in protecting my mental health is not allowing myself to get stressed or anxious about things that are out of my control. So I really take a lot of time in processing those things and, journaling about them. I'm a massive advocate for journaling, getting stuff out and almost cleaning the slate before you start the new day. I really, really love being able to do that for myself. And also when you journal and write things down, you can always go back to it and have a look. And sometimes you'll read about a day in your life like a year ago and you'll think, my goodness, there's been so much change and transformation, and I don't always see it because I'm living myself every day. Rather than, if I look back, I can see I was a very, in a different space then as to where I am now. So I think for me, these are tools that I use for my mental health and well-being. That and food. I'm a massive foodie, I love food, and I'm trying very hard as I'm a more mature lady now, and I have to be mindful about being healthy, to be more responsible with the type of food that I'm eating. But offer me a plate of anything and that definitely changes my mood and gets me very much uplifted.
And I'm laughing because I'm thinking you and me both. And do you like to cook as well?
Oh, I love it. I love it. At the moment, I'm going through this exploration on pulses and beans, because I don't know about anybody else, but my mother is a brilliant cook and she's all about having contingency food in the cupboards just in case. And, this could be tinned lentils, tinned black beans, tinned kidney beans, lots of different things. I thought, oh, actually, why should we wait for contingency to be using these things? So I've been exploring lots of curries and stews and enjoying the process and trying different things, because life is about exploring, right? Not just physically, but also in terms of what we enjoy to do and what we enjoy doing and eating. So I'm all about that at the moment.
Brilliant. And you've just described my cupboards and Nzinga as well. In fact, my husband was like, why do you keep buying these pulses? I'm like, I use them. So finally, if people want to know more about you and your work and work with Avi-I Solutions, I will, of course, include the links in the show notes. Please share away and tell our listeners what you are looking to connect with people with and work with them on.
So the easiest way to find me is to go onto LinkedIn. If you put in Nzinga OR, I am the only one that comes up at the moment still. So out of the billions of people on LinkedIn, it shouldn't be too hard to find me. But if you put in Nzinga Orgill, I will come up, and my information is all there. I've made my profile really user-friendly. So it tells you all about the business, but also there are links to kind of get some time in with me and to, see what product I'm offering and service I'm offering. What I would say is, do hit me up and book some time with me. As you probably can tell from this podcast, I love speaking to people. I really enjoy interacting and engaging with people and just hearing their journey and their stories, and just understanding where there's a synergy and opportunities to collaborate to create some amazing transformations in the space of aviation. In terms of the work that I do, as mentioned, it is really looking at that passenger end-to-end experience, and this is the end to end. So there is nothing, left hidden or kept away. It's the moment, people realize they want to travel, what happens then, and how inclusive is that whole experience up until the point that they've traveled, come back and they're looking at their holiday snaps and reminiscing. So for me, it's really important to kind of understand what that needs to look like and how that needs to be done. And especially shining a light on passengers that come from marginalized groups who are often overlooked because the experience isn't widely shared and therefore widely communicated and understood. At the moment, I have a Navigating the Skies audit that's available for people to book onto. And basically, it's an audit that asks a series of questions around, what's happening within your airport, certain checkpoints as part of the passenger end-to-end journey, how inclusive they are, what kind of practices you have in place. And then there's a diagnostic report provided on the back of those questions, and a consultancy one-to-one chat with myself where you can get a chance to really pick through some of the pain points and some of the areas of opportunity. And what I would say is this audit's a fantastic way of, first of all, checking where you are. We're never ever where we think we are. So it's always good to do an audit to understand where you are, but also where the areas you need to concentrate are as well. We don't want to be doing tick boxy tokenistic stuff that gives the appearance of being inclusive, and actually there's really low hanging fruit in terms of the things that could be done that will really make a massive difference. So with the audit, it almost signposts you to where you need to focus on. And the beauty of it is that you can take it away, you can do the work internally, you can do the work with Avi-I Solutions if you choose to, or you can bring in somebody else that's more aligned to what you want to do. But it's a great starting point to almost be the catalyst for change in terms of creating that accessible, equitable, inclusive passenger end-to-end experience for all passengers.
Thank you so much, Nzinga, for your insights, your deep knowledge, sharing so much with us. Please, everyone, if you want to know more, do follow the show notes and do contact Nzinga. Thank you so much for kicking off our series for race equity in February. And Nzinga, we will speak soon. It's been great having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Layla. I appreciate it. I've really enjoyed myself.
Oh, brilliant. And everyone, take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.